Oh, I've been waiting for this video for a long time. And probably longer still to upload it because the series is still being uploaded as I'm recording this. And actually, I'll just go ahead and say this. I have done the Yumi DLC since then as well. That's all I'm gonna say. But we're here to talk about the poll for the first game because they actually had one. In fact, they have one on every game, and I think it'll be fun to revisit these after I play each game. You all have to let me know, but we have to do the first one because, well, let's just take a look. Alright? So I have them covered right now, and I'll reveal each one. We're going to start with the first place, and we're going to work our way down. Now, with that being said, let us begin with the first place. Now, if you hadn't seen this poll, any guesses on who it could be? I mean, obviously you can't comment down below, it's not a chat. I mean, you could comment down below on what your guesses are, but yeah, I wouldn't mind that if you would like to, by all means. But the first character is Mirai. And honestly, I'm not upset about that. Assuming that everybody has played both routes, which, I am assuming, there is a massive change in character from the Hanzo route to the Hebijo route. Mirai in the Hebijo route was a much better character and had a lot of very heartwarming moments, I felt. Though I will say we didn't actually get a concrete backstory on Mirai, but I felt it was good enough to have a good understanding of what her character was. I wouldn't be upset by anybody who said Mirai is another one, definitely not. Number 2, however, did surprise me a bit. It's Ikaruga. And this is where I really want to start talking about some stuff, alright? Because I could see this based on what we saw once again in the Hebijo route. There was that whole scene with Ikaruga and Yomi, and I was very impressed. But my whole thing was that I don't know fully Ikaruga's backstory, so there's some things that were missing that I needed to get in order for me to be able to say, alright, yeah, definitely you're my favorite of the group. So I was kind of in limbo. So what am I wanting to talk about? I took a glimpse. I didn't read it. I just took a glimpse of the Hanzo routes manga. And if I'm correct, it looks like the initial part came out before the game, or at least before Burst. Remember, the Hanzo route came out as a game by its own. Then it was combined with the Hebijo route later. And then this poll was done. So I'm saying that to say, I'll just show you a glimpse with the same glimpse that I got of Ikaruga. The Ikaruga we know, I could never see making that face. So clearly, a massive character development moment has already happened by the time we start the Hanzo route. So I'm saying, since this poll it had to have been just Japanese people because, back then, if there were some people overseas who voted, I don't even know how this poll was done. Online wasn't as popular. There are many things to make me think this is Japanese only, and I'll get to that also in a second. But if they already read the manga, and that was part of it, and it gives you an idea, because that one glimpse gave me an idea that Ikaruga was not completely fine with her place in life, then I could see them making that a solidified number 2. Also, if Ikaruga did go through all that character growth, I kind of would have wanted her to be the leader. I would have read it, but I think parts of that story will be addressed in later games, so I didn't want to spoil myself, The Hebijo manga was pretty much a different version of the route we had in the game. I will also add that these two are the most Japanese-like of the group, and I've noticed that tends to be a trend in character polls that I've seen. With characters like Hinata, or Hancock in One Piece, or Rukia in Bleach, Noir in the Neptunian series. They tend to like those characters, basically. So I think that also might have helped these two out. I don't want to say that's the only reason, but I do think it is a part of it. Just because I've seen it. Now, number 3. Any guesses? It's my number 1. Homura. Honestly, I was shocked. I was very shocked. I thought people wouldn't be that much of a fan of Homura. And maybe that's because I'm basing it on the polls from Uzume, and Uzume's just late in the game, people already know other characters. Homura's been there from the beginning. And I agree. Aside from the part where Homura wasn't acting like Homura, even as the villain, I found Homura to be an interesting, compelling character. And Homura was the first one where I said, yes, you're definitely waifu material. You've all heard me say good things about Homura, so I'll leave it at that for now, until we get to some of the other characters. But yeah, number 3, that would have been my number 1, but I can respect it. So number 4 is my number 2, Hikage. Maybe this is more just personal, but it was hard for me, even with the eyes, to look at Hikage as a villain. It was more so, it seemed like Hikage needed help. I didn't get the sense of cold and heartless, but did have a heart, but had trouble expressing it, Not to mention the backstory as well, and seeing Hikage express emotions for the first time. Like I said, that's my number 2. So, again, I have a bit of bias when it comes to these two, so I'll leave it at that. And we'll move on to number 5, which I also agree with, Yagyu. I have little to say about this except Yagyu's been solid. Yagyu was solid. How I thought a shinobi of Hanzo should act, that's Yagyu. And I feel like I need to say nothing more. So, number 6. It surprised me at first, but then it didn't. It's Yomi. And this is where things get interesting, because while I appreciate Yomi's character, when you look at that scene between Ikaraga, the number 2 on this list, right? You would think after a scene like that, a lot of people would have some resentment toward Yomi. It was realistic, of course, but nevertheless, you still wonder. But Yomi's actually number 6. That doesn't mean, a lot of people don't like Yomi. It just means a lot of people still did. But for me, that signifies anyone under Yomi people potentially had a problem with. At least, that's what I was thinking, because that was a very intense moment. And again, it was against the number 2 on the list. Normally people take that personally. So let's move on to number 7. It's Hibari. Once again, surprised me at first, but then it didn't. Personally, I didn't have too much of a problem with Hibari's role, because the story punished Hibari for her mistakes. If she had continued to get off scot-free after messing up, then that would have been one thing. And plus, it was a combo deal. Like, yes, while Hibari was the main one at fault for this role, in the Hanzo route, I also was hoping Team Hanzo would clearly look out for their friend if they were championing friendship, right? And I'm also not sure if gameplay had any impact on this. And also the gameplay for the first game was different than what I played. Hibari was definitely, I feel, the hardest to use, despite people saying electricity was OP. But I can clearly see a lot of people having an issue with Hibari in the story. It's not that I didn't, it's just I didn't dislike Hibari for it. I'll say that. I had more of a tolerance. However, there's something that's very interesting about this list. It's that our MC hasn't shown up yet. And that's who number 8 is. Asuka. When I saw this, I couldn't believe it. I've seen a lot of character polls recently, right? In fact, just before this, I recorded the results of the Neptunia character poll. Being the MC should give you a lot of weight, Normally, they're in like the top 3, maybe the top 5 of a lot of characters. But in this case, and I'll go ahead and show you the rest of the list right now, because I'm pretty sure I know why the remaining 4 are in the positions that they're in. I'll just go ahead and cover them real quick. Katsuragi and Haruka, they're the fan service characters. I'm pretty sure they're in this position because of that reason alone. I guess it's one of those things where people appreciate them there, but wouldn't call them their favorite. I don't know. Or honestly, I could say a lot of why these two are number 9, number 10. But I think the reason that I gave is sufficient. You can, if you want to draw further conclusions, you can. I won't. I'm just gonna say that. I also could say if people really cared about the story to begin with, then they focused on the characters. But even then, Katsuragi had a really good backstory, and so did Haruka, like they both did. So I'm pretty sure that, like I said, everyone after Yomi, I think people had some issue with, and except for 11 and 12. I just think they weren't in the game long enough, and honestly, it's hard to compare the two of them with the rest of the 10. Like Ren and Daidoji, I would compare with Ren and Daidoji, and even then, Ren was in the game a lot longer, so it's just not fair, you know. So I don't really put much stock into the last two. So really, with that being said, the fact that Asuka's number 8, and not just number 8, if you notice, 4 members of the team that's considered the villains, and 3 members of our own team beat the MC. That, to me, nothing screams more that there's a problem with your main character than that. Especially when you look at it that Homura is actually the one that meets that qualification that I was saying, in the top 3, really, more like the top 5. And the main series I'm comparing it to is the Neptunia series. I've seen Neptune fluctuate from spot number 1 to spot number 3, but mainly people like the MC. But Asuka is literally under a character who caused the most problems in both of the routes. Honestly, what this screams to me is that you need a new main character. You know, if we're just talking about the main 10, then that means Asuka's rank was really 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10. But it makes sense. All the stuff that I was pointing out, and you know, in some cases it seemed like I was getting resistance to, I was trying to say, like, guys, I think if I was a person who was supposed to look over the script and point out any flaws, I would have said so many for Asuka. I would have been like, you cannot do this. And not just Asuka, but really the team as a whole. Team Heavy-Joe in both routes seem like a superior team, and this shows it. Looking at this list, if you didn't know which was which and you just knew what side each person was on, you would assume the opposite is the case. Like Team Heavy-Joe was actually the protagonist. And like I said, at the end of the game, I was like, Team Hanzo's route literally made me say, I don't want to play this game anymore. While the Heavy-Joe route was like, I want to see a whole series just following this team. They were more interesting. And you know what I think the main thing is? That Asuka doesn't even fit her own series. With how serious things got in this game and the profession that they are signed up to do, Homura fits things a lot more. Asuka literally seems like one of the people who shouldn't even be here in the first place. Barely got a motivation, little to no backstory. With the main character, it's supposed to be, you know, the character that's the main focus, you know? The one we're interested to watch them go on a journey. Instead, I honestly found myself thinking, I want Asuka to lose. I feel like the only reason things are happening in Asuka's favor is because she is the main character, and that's literally the worst thing you want. Like, of course, all main characters you see, in theory, a lot of things do end up going their way, at least until the end of the story, where either they succeed or they fail. Their story is over, one way or the other. But I am not interested in Asuka's story one bit. And so looking at this rank, what I immediately think is that you need a new main character. If I had been doing series back then, I would have said, the way they're doing it, they could easily either A, change the focus to where Team Heavy-Joe was the stars, because we see from the polls, you know, they're clearly the favorite team. And there's more I think you can do with the story with the team on the run than the team that's currently in the system. There's so much that they have to consider when they're doing their actions and, you know, moving forward. So many places that they can visit. They're basically officially in the field now, you know what I mean? So that would have been choice 1, or 2, make a completely different team and try to make a brand new main character. Which is funny, because I glanced over all the other polls before I knew anything of the characters. I figured, if I don't know any characters' names, they're not going to stick. So I can at least see, I at least wanted to know. Really, the only thing I was looking for, I'll be completely honest, was that did Asuka's rank rise? I won't say what I saw, and I recommend anybody watching blind not to take a look at the polls. But I will say this. There was one thing that was very consistent from every poll after this one, except Deep Crimson, because that poll's not listed on here. And I actually did find it. Maybe we'll talk about that if I ever get around to playing it or trying it, or watching it in general. But because I think I do want to try to check that out. But you know who the number one character is after this point? Yumi. And I was like, well, now that's interesting, isn't it? Now I haven't played any of the future games, so I can't really comment on if that's a fair rank or not. But I will say, now if I was the developers and I saw that ranking, while changing the main character might not be what they want to do, although I always thought the series was one where like each game, like for some games centered around some teams. I just thought that would be what happens. Not that each game has different routes and that some of the routes aren't canon. Because then some of the parts that you like won't happen. Like I was talking about Transformers, how they have the heroes and the villains. Some games had it to where they split their paths, but then other games had it to where maybe you play as the villains first and then the heroes, fix what they did, or you switch places between both of them. Both stories still happen, and they could have done that with Hanzo route. But anyways, that's for a different video. For now, I'm just saying, if I'm the developer and I see that is now my pseudo main character. Because that's what you want the main character to be. That's what you want to give the most time to the characters people like. Because that's the position that your main character can be. And if I'm the developers and I saw that second poll and I see the number one is actually one of the leaders and a good Shinobi at that, I'm like, alright, we're changing the focus of the series because this is what people want to see. Though I will add, I also wonder if Japan has a bias towards ice users. Why am I saying that? Because in Bleach, in the top two, I know if you haven't seen Bleach, you won't know this reference, but the top two, for a lot of them, were ice users. Hitsugaya and Rukia. And while I am a fan of them as well, I have ice bias, I was surprised to see them do that well consistently. I can't confirm anything, but I do wonder if that is something that, like, if just a bunch of ice users end up being high in polls. I have to do more research on that. Don't take my word for that. Take that with a massive grain of salt. But now you all see why I had to discuss this, because I overall thoughts, I am actually impressed by how this poll turned out. It seems like the people who voted on this poll, they actually paid attention to the story. And I would say they didn't let certain things influence their decision, just because they like the character, but because all of them look virtually the same. But then there's Mirai and Ikariga. They did both do great things, so I can't really, bat that down. And I can see reasons on why they would be legitimate number ones and number twos, but nevertheless. So with that being said, please post your thoughts on what you think about just this poll. If you have played future games, please don't say anything about Yumi. Alright, if I thought you would have, I would have never mentioned it. It's just an interesting fact, but don't give me your impressions because we haven't done it yet. Alright? I still need to play the second game to even know what the plot is, for one. I don't know anything about it. It's far too soon to be speaking about that. In fact, I might ask some of my admins if they can delete any comment that does talk about it. There will be time for that, but for right now, I just want to focus on these 12. And by all means, feel free to rank them down in the comments below, because really, it doesn't matter what this ranking says. It matters what you all think. And if a bunch of you all like a character then I want to try to be considerate. But I do have to express my concerns with Asuka. So, with that being said, please post your thoughts down in the comments below, and I'll see you all next time.